Hello, N4H&H here with the Yaesu FT-710. In this video, I'm going to update the firmware. Yaesu has put out a firmware update for the FT-710, and I have downloaded it to this SD card. So the SD card is going to plug in here on the left of the radio. Turn it a little bit and put it into the slot. You do that with the transceiver turned off. And by the way, you cannot have any type of a USB connection to the radio while you're doing this. And I should mention that if you're trying to read from or write to the SD card while you do have a USB port plugged in, it'll seem broken. So be sure that you do not have anything plugged into the rear USB ports. It would be therefore polling those ports. If you're trying to use the SD card, you can't do both at the same time. But I don't have a cable plugged into the back. I'm going to power up now. And let me move this camera a little bit so I can reach over there to it. All right, I'm going to go into the function menu, extension setting, and SD card. And before I do that, let me show you something. I'm going to look at the current software version. See, it's everything's except SDR is 00. So this was the way this radio came out of the box. All right, and now I'm going to go to SD card. Scroll down to firmware update. See right here. Done. Now it's showing the versions that are ready to be updated. And well, it looks like only 2 need to be updated, and the display wants to be updated first. So we'll go ahead and tap update and OK. Wow, the display is going from V0100 to V0105. So now, since this is the first available update for this rig, that tells me that 01, 01, 2, 3, and 4 were probably rolled out with some of the production runs. That can happen. Sometimes a production run will get an update that is not available to us for download yet. Okay, well, let's see here. Is it going to power back up? All right, well, there we go. Now let's see what we have. I'm going to, function menu, extension setting, software version. So see, the display is now V0105. So we'll go back to the, sorry about bumping the camera there. Go back to the SD card now. So we'll go back V0105. So we'll go back to the SD card option, press function knob, come down, firmware update, press. Display has been done, so I'm going to select main, and actually don't need to do display, so I'm going to unselect it. So now we'll upload the main. And if you go to Yaesu's website for the FT-710, click on Files. You'll see the files you download. There's also a file there, and you can read all of the different things that this update is supposed to solve. And then it just says, and other things. Well, curiously, there is no mention that the DSP was improved any. And that's one of the weakest links in this radio to me. Not the DNF. The DNF works okay. That's Yaesu speak for auto notch. That one is okay. Notch works okay, fine. The width is fine. But the digital noise reduction is nowhere near the level of the digital noise reduction in this radio's predecessor, the FT-DX10. So Hopefully Yaesu is improving that in this update. Maybe not. It wasn't mentioned. I would think it would be mentioned, because I'm not the only one that has noted the big difference there between the FT-10 and the FT-710 with respect to the digital noise reduction. In this radio, it's very, very curious. While it updates, I'll mention this. So in the FT-891, if any of you have watched my video series on that radio, and I'm just going to take the opportunity to, in fact, I had a wonderful post this morning or comment to one of my videos. Someone who actually used an FTDX 5000 MP video to learn how to operate a feature on their FT-710. So that's true. I encourage you, don't just watch videos for the radio you particularly own, because I teach techniques on various different radios that apply to other radios, and not even necessarily always just other Yaesu radios. So a lot of you viewers miss out. In fact, some of you will say, hey, are you going to do a video that covers this? Well, I've already done it, but I might have done it with a different radio. And, you know, I'm not going to try to repeat the same exact teaching technique just because I changed radios. So be aware of that, and, you know, to be sure that you don't miss out on anything. Okay, after the second update installs, you're going to see the radio power off. But this time, before you power on, you're going to need to do a reset, which is to hold DSP reset and find fast. These two buttons, the lower left and lower right of the VFO, you're going to need to hold those down while powering up. Before I do that, though, I want to explain something. Before I even perform this update, I made a backup of my menus. I haven't programmed any memories into this rig yet. Remember, it's a loaner. So I may or may not get around to doing that, because it works practically the same as it does in the FT-10. But I do have some memory adjustments that I've made, transmit audio such as that. So, you know, I do have those backed up to a card, to the SD card, the same SD card that I just pulled the update from. And so, and be sure to follow those update instructions exactly as written. It does work, as you've seen in this video, but you got to make sure you follow it as written. So just know that when you do the reset, you're going to lose any changes you made in the menus and memories, so you can recall those using the SD card. One word of caution: some people, certain types of main menu updates in the FT-10 would have an issue where if you then loaded your memory settings from the SD card, there could be issues, and that would mean, you know, in a case where the firmware update made some changes to the menu that were not compatible with the previous menu. So sometimes it's better, and those of you who have access to my Patreon portal, the executive and VIP Patreons, you can just go through the document that I made available for you to go through the menu and set it up the way I set mine up. So you'd have that to fall back on anyway, even if you did update to a new firmware and didn't want to risk reloading the menus from the previous firmware. I probably will not risk it. I don't know. This is a guinea pig radio. Maybe I will. We'll see. But that not in this video. But here we go. I'm going to hold these two down. That's DSP reset and find fast. And I'm going to power up. And now let go. See, now look, 7 megahertz. It's definitely reset. Okay, I've repositioned the camera a little bit so I can get my fingers in there to make adjustments. So the radio is going to default to 7 megahertz, like all Yaesus do, fresh out of the box. And, and we've just performed this reset. So let me turn the antenna on. You might be wondering, well, what are those signals? Even with the antenna off, I'm picking up some stations. But these receivers, especially at this frequency, are very, very sensitive. That's why you see me all the time using intercept point optimization and attenuation down on these lower frequencies. All right, here we go. There's the antenna. Ooh, and it looks like I need to cut the grass. Well, first of all, it defaults to level, which is good. On the FT-10, I had the outer ring assigned to be level using the C.S button, C.S dot, custom switch, but on this radio you don't have an outer dial, so they've defaulted to that the function knob will be level, and that's fine, but I want to change the color scheme. I like this color scheme here, color 10, and now I'll put it back to level, and I will cut the grass. That is the scope sensitivity, okay? I don't want to see a wall of noise. I only want to see signals. And it looks like, 30 dB of cut, or negative 30 dB is the most you can do. And that'll be okay, but that just shows you how sensitive this receiver is. Look, there's still little spikes in there. But I don't normally run an amplifier, preamplifier. See, it defaults to amp 1, and I also normally use attenuation on this band. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to put this on intercept point optimization. I use intercept point optimization on 14 megahertz, 17 megahertz, sometimes even 21 megahertz if their signal is strong enough that I don't need the amplifier. You want to not use amp 1 or amp 2 unless you absolutely have to. On these lower frequencies like this, you do not need an amplifier. So I instantly go to IPO, and IPO also helps with something called the cross-modulation characteristic of the receiver. Layman's terms, it'll help the receiver reject interference a little bit better up and down the band. So also I'm going to notice that didn't drop the S meter all the way down to 0. I'm going to kick in a little bit of attenuation. I usually do 6 dB. There we go. Now let's find a signal. I'm going to use the step MCH button. If you just rotate it, it's going to step in 5 kilohertz increments. That's adjustable in the menu. It's also used to cycle through the memory channels if you program some in, and I do encourage you to do that. It's also used to adjust the DSP. Okay, before we go further, let's check the DNR. It's known for at algorithm 4 and above. In the previous firmware version, it introduced that underwater effect and made people sound a little bit distorted. So let me turn it on. Turn the volume up a little bit. Little difference. Now let me show you something. I'm going to turn it off again, and I'm going to turn off my attenuation and go back to amp 1. There's a reason I want you to see this. You see, you don't notice as much difference when you've got amp 1 engaged and attenuation off. Very negligible. Well, now, for one thing, I know the previous version of this, we'll find out on this version, but it didn't really have a lot of effect with algorithm 1, and that's what it defaults to. If you long press, you'll see that it is on, they call it level, but they're really algorithms. I mean, it's a little bit noticeable, but not great. But if you go ahead and turn on IPO, and a 6 dB of attenuation, you're going to help the digital noise reduction scheme because it's going to have less noise to have to separate out. So listen. Now I'm going to long press and go to algorithm 3. And that's about like it was before, where you just don't hear a lot of difference between algorithms 1 through 3. But it's noticeable when you get your IPO engaged and use some attenuation. Like I said, work that S meter to the left, get it down to 0. Okay, now let's see what happens with algorithm 4. Yeah, we still have that underwater effect. And that will no doubt be worse with amp 1 and no attenuation. Let's see how it sounds with somebody talking.
According to Kelly, should be in jail.
Yeah, hear the distortion. I guess they didn't make any improvements to the digital noise reduction. Let's go down to 3. That's about as high as you can go and call it usable. Now, one of the things you can do to help this, IPO, attenuation, that will let algorithm 3 be a little bit more effective. You can even roll back the RF gain a little bit. Hey, it sounds like they fixed the RF gain. I don't hear that scratchy sound. It almost sounded like a dirty potentiometer. The FT-710 does it. But I'm not hearing it in this particular radio. But in the previous firmware, it did it. It's in there a little bit. No. That's just band noise changing. Yeah, so there was a definite scratchiness, so it looks like they've corrected that. Okay, well, there you have it. The firmware update is complete. You can read Yaesu's website to find out all the little things that they did. Just a lot of little quirky things like trouble trying to use a straight key for CW, the clicking, popping sound you would hear in the speaker during CW, or turning the volume all the way off to on a little bit. You'd hear it's still in there a little bit. It's not objectionable, but you know, a lot of little idiosyncrasies seem to be fixed according to that list, but definitely it does not look like DNR got any improvement. So now auto notch, probably okay. It was okay before. That's the digital notch filter that Yaesu calls digital notch filter. It's auto notch in other languages, I guess, other radios. But that worked fine before. Hear that heterodyne? Well, it went away. Let me find one. There we go. It doesn't quite knock it all out, and that was the case before, but it also doesn't introduce the distortion like the FT-710. That's the weakness in the FT-710 to me. The big weakness is it's DNF, but I don't use it anyway. I'll show you, that notch. That'll definitely knock it out. And if you know me, bonus here, I go to the function menu, operation setting, receive DSP, and I set that IF notch to narrow. Now you hear the noise come back? That's because I'm carving out a smaller portion of spectrum. But all you got to do now, engage it, tap it till it flickers, and narrow down. There we go, 1440 hertz. And I'll tell you why I do that. It knocks out the heterodyne, but it doesn't carve out as much of the audio spectrum, so it doesn't have as much of an effect on how people sound. Okay, a little bonus on this video. Update's done. Hopefully they'll do some more updates and improve that digital noise reduction, but as it stands now, I would take the FT-710's digital noise reduction over this particular radio's DNR. Those of you who don't use DNR, it won't matter, but I got spoiled by the FT-5000MP and then the FT-710, where their noise reduction doesn't ever introduce any of that underwater digital artifact. It just works. It just removes the noise. I'm so spoiled by it. I don't like to listen to the grind of band noise in between people's words and syllables. So I got spoiled by it, so I use it all the time. It's at least always, I'll set it to at least algorithm 1, and oftentimes I'll just set it to 3 and forget it. So in this particular radio, algorithm 3 is not as effective as it is in the FT-710, and algorithm 4 begins to introduce that distortion and that underwater sound. It is interesting that the FT-891, 991, 991A have that underwater sound as well up through algorithm 8, After algorithm 8, algorithm 9, it clears up. In fact, it gets so good that the noise is so eliminated, all you hear is what's called AGC hold or AGC tail, AGC hang time. It's a little bit of an echo effect but that is always there as a result of the automatic gain control circuit, but you don't hear it when the noise is there. But when the noise is eliminated, you can hear it. So that's just how good the algorithm in the FT-891, 991, 991A is at algorithm 9. But below algorithm 9, I wouldn't even suggest trying to use it. It's reverse in this radio. You get the underwater effect at algorithm 4 and higher, which is very interesting to me. But okay, I hope you found this video helpful and informative. I want to thank the Patreon support team who bring these videos to you. I'm not independently wealthy. I would not be able to justify the time and expense involved in producing these tip videos like this were it not for the support of the Patreon support team. So I appreciate their support, and I encourage you to become a part of that team if you want me to continue to be able to bring out videos like this. You can join by going to www.patreon.com/N4HNH. I'll put that on the bottom of the screen here. And if you would, please like the video. That helps us out with YouTube, costs you nothing. And consider subscribing to the channel. If you do subscribe to the channel, be sure to click the notification bell so you won't miss another video. You'll be notified when I upload a new video. And finally, if you would, share the link to this video on social media, text message, email, or phone a friend. Hey, thanks again for watching, and 73 from N4HNH.